This is the story of the missing secret documents from the UN archives, a case so obscure and unnerving that most would dismiss it as mere conspiracy. But those who have dared to dig deeper whisper of shadows in the corridors of diplomacy, of whispers in empty halls, and of files that vanish without a trace, leaving behind only a chill in the air and a sense that someone or something is watching. It all began on a night unlike any other in Geneva, usually drowned in routine bureaucracy. The streets were slick from rain, the wet cobblestones reflecting the dim orange glow of streetlights. The UN headquarters loomed in the distance, an imposing fortress of glass and stone, its flags drooping under the weight of rain. Inside, in the bowels of the Secretariat building, something had gone terribly wrong. Lucien Moreau, a low-level archivist with a reputation for obsessive attention to detail, was the first to notice the anomaly. He had worked at the UN archives for nearly a decade, cataloging documents with meticulous care, often spending nights alone among towering shelves of classified material. On this evening, while cross-referencing Cold War-era files, a small, almost imperceptible detail caught his eye. A folder marked Top Secret Special Research Projects, 1978, was missing. At first, he assumed a clerical error. Archives are prone to misfiling. But as he searched, unease grew heavier. Entire sections of the shelf seemed disturbed, as though rifled through hurriedly. There was no forced entry. The security systems reported normal activity. Motion sensors detected nothing. Yet the folder was undeniably gone. Lucien's curiosity overpowered fear. The document reportedly contained highly sensitive information, research projects that had been classified for decades, involving experiments that some claimed crossed ethical boundaries most nations would never admit to. Rumors suggested these files weren't just confidential, they were dangerous. Dangerous enough that people had allegedly disappeared over their contents. He began with the logs. Every entry of document access was meticulously recorded. At 2:14 a.m., he noticed an anomaly. A temporary badge had been used to access the restricted section, one not assigned to any current staff member. The badge was real, yet traced back to no identity, leaving a blank line where a name should have been. Whoever or whatever had taken the folder had penetrated the archives invisibly, leaving no trace except the void where the document once lay. The next day, Lucien tried to speak to his supervisor, Marianne Keller, only to find her office empty. A note said she had been called to an emergency meeting, but the handwriting was unfamiliar. He shrugged it off, assuming higher-ups had summoned her, and decided to proceed alone. As days passed, the situation grew stranger. Files reappeared in odd locations, some slightly torn or smudged, as though handled roughly. The archives themselves seemed to resist him. Lights flickered in empty hallways, computers froze mid-search, and temperatures would drop inexplicably, leaving his breath visible despite central heating. Then came the first note. Tucked inside an old ledger, written on decades-old paper with fresh ink, it read, "Some truths are meant to vanish. Stop digging or you will too." Lucien laughed nervously, assuming a prank, but the effect was immediate. A sense of being watched, as if unseen eyes tracked his every move. Even in the crowded cafeteria, he felt the weight of invisible scrutiny, a creeping dread settling in his stomach. Unable to shake the feeling, he cataloged every irregularity, missing or displaced files, patterns in the disappearances. He discovered that documents from the late 1970s, related to what he called the silent projects, were targeted. Little was known about these initiatives. Some whispers among retired staff hinted at experiments in psychological manipulation, secret communications technologies, and attempts to influence global political events without public awareness. The missing 1978 folder seemed central to a puzzle no one was meant to assemble. Then, the disappearances began. Colleagues who discussed the files with him called in sick or left without notice. Even Marianne Keller vanished, leaving only a cryptic voicemail. "If you value your mind, stop looking. They are watching." Lucien's world blurred between reality and paranoia. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision, dissolving when looked at directly. Shelves shifted when he wasn't looking, books out of order as if the building were alive. One night, driven by obsession, he stayed late to confront whatever force was behind the disappearances. Armed only with a flashlight and a notebook, he roamed the silent halls. He reached the restricted section, swiping the access card that inexplicably worked despite the earlier anomaly. Inside, the room was colder than expected, shelves stretching farther than they should have. The lights dimmed. From the shadows came a soft scraping like nails on metal. Panicked, he spun his flashlight, revealing nothing but rows of shelves. The sound came again, closer. Then he saw it, the missing folder, floating inches above a shelf, pages fluttering as if blown by a wind that did not exist. Lucien froze. Whispers filled the room. Voices in languages he did not know, yet their meaning was clear. Fear, warning, command. His mind screamed to run, but he could not look away. Slowly, almost hypnotically, the folder descended into his outstretched hands. When his fingers brushed the cover, a jolt of energy threw him backward. The room spun, shelves twisted grotesquely, and the whispers became shrieks. When he awoke, he was on the floor, flashlight shattered, papers scattered. The folder was gone. Rational thought failed him, but he knew it had not been taken by human hands. Whatever had claimed it was something else entirely. In the weeks that followed, Lucien became a shadow of himself. Rarely leaving the archives, he lived among whispers, shifting shadows and cold drafts that seemed to follow him. Eyes unseen watched him constantly. He began keeping a diary, documenting impossible events, crude sketches of the floating folder, twisting shelves, and figures at the edges of his vision. His notes grew frantic. It moves when I look away. It knows my thoughts. The folder, it contains knowledge they cannot allow. I am not safe. I am never safe. One night, a new message appeared on a computer he had not touched. Lucien, you are closer than you think, but closer is dangerous. The line vanished, leaving only the hum of the monitor and his own terrified breathing. He realized he was being guided, manipulated, tested, and the missing documents were not just papers, they were a key to knowledge mankind was not meant to see, secrets buried by power and fear. Obsessed, he traced every record, every lead, plunging deeper into a labyrinth of secrets, lies, and shadows. His mundane job cataloging documents had become a descent into an unfathomable nightmare. Each day, the sense of being watched, stalked, hunted grew stronger. Then, in the dead of a stormy night, he found a hidden passage behind a false panel in the archive wall. The gap was narrow, crawling with dust and cobwebs, yet beyond lay a room absent from blueprints. Inside, rows of metal cabinets stretched into darkness, labeled with dates and cryptic codes. At the far end, on a pedestal, was the folder, the missing folder, resting as though waiting. Lucien approached cautiously, heart hammering. Whispers returned, louder now, urgent, commanding. He reached for the cover. A cold electric shock surged through his body, and the air filled with a roar like 1,000 voices crying at once. The world fractured, and in that instant, Lucien understood. This was not a mere document. It was a doorway to truths mankind was never meant to see, secrets buried by power and fear. And now, somehow, he had been chosen to witness it. The shock from the folder threw Lucien to the floor. For a long, disorienting moment, he could not distinguish reality from hallucination. The whispers, deafening, clawed at the edges of his mind. A presence pressed down on him, ancient, intelligent, malevolent. The very air of the hidden chamber seemed sentient, bending around his thoughts. When he regained some consciousness, the folder was gone, leaving only a faint shimmer in the air. He scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, scanning the room. The cabinets loomed like silent sentinels, their cryptic codes mocking him. One drawer was slightly ajar, a drawer locked decades ago. Inside were dozens of yellow documents, brittle and torn. Lucien hesitated, fingers trembling as he picked one up. The text shifted beneath his gaze, words rearranging impossibly. Yet somehow he understood. Experiments manipulating human perception, technologies bending memory, a network of operatives placed globally to suppress knowledge deemed too dangerous. The folder was part of something far larger, a web of secrets humanity was not ready for, and yet the documents called to him, demanding understanding. It was not just curiosity, it was a compulsion, an almost physical pull toward the truth. He left the hidden room with a few fragile documents tucked under his jacket. Outside the secret passage, the archives were unnaturally quiet. Lucien felt watched, always watched, sensing eyes tracking him through walls and corridors. Over the next days, Lucien became a ghost in the UN building. He avoided colleagues, moved silently through the halls, and spent hours poring over the forbidden papers in his small office. Each page revealed more about the silent projects, hidden research into psychological conditioning, electromagnetic fields capable of altering perception, and references to unidentified forces, the Custodians, tasked with ensuring dangerous knowledge never reached the public. One stormy night, he found a folder detailing disappearances, names, dates, circumstances of those who had inquired too deeply. Some vanished completely, others returned hollow-eyed, speaking unknown languages. Lucien realized with terrifying clarity that he was on the same path. Every sleepless night, every shadow, every anomaly was a warning. The Custodians were aware of him, patient, waiting for him to cross the final line. Yet it was not fear alone that drove him. A question gnawed at him. What was in the folder that made it so dangerous? He had felt its pull, sensed its knowledge, but could not grasp it fully. Against every instinct for self-preservation, he resolved to find it again. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Security systems reported a glitch. Lights flickered. Lucien, now familiar with the archive's hidden rhythms, knew this was his chance. He slipped past guards, bypassed access points, and descended into the shadowed depths where the secret passage lay. The room was unchanged yet different. The air vibrated with unseen energy. And there it was, the folder floating above the pedestal. But now, a figure stood in the shadows, tall, impossibly thin, face obscured by a hood. Lucien felt the weight of its gaze. The whispers rose, speaking directly into his mind. "You do not belong here. Leave, or be consumed." Lucien froze, but the compulsion to understand overpowered him. He stepped forward, hand outstretched. The figure seemed to warp reality itself. His fingers brushed the folder, and the world tilted. The whispers became a chorus, overlapping voices, all speaking at once. Names, places, warnings, commands, histories of decades-long experiments, all rushing into his consciousness. Pain shot through his head, as though his skull were too small to contain the torrent of information. He fell to his knees, gasping, yet the knowledge would not release him. Hours seemed to pass, suspended between comprehension and madness, each page imprinting itself onto his mind with terrifying precision. Then silence. When Lucien opened his eyes, the figure was gone. The folder lay harmless on the pedestal. The room was quiet, peaceful, as if nothing had happened. Yet he knew better. He had glimpsed the machinery of control operating in secret for decades. The world outside the archives was unaware, but he could never unsee what he had learned. For days, Lucien could not leave his office. He became gaunt, sleep-deprived, paranoid. He avoided calls, stopped eating properly, and transcribed forbidden knowledge into his diary. But every time he did, he felt unseen eyes watching. Shadows moved against the storm-lit streets outside his window, disappearing before he could identify them. Then came a letter slipped under his office door, plain with no markings. Inside, "Lucien, it is time to choose, knowledge or survival. Decide wisely." He realized the Custodians were no longer waiting. They were acting. The folder, the documents, the knowledge, they were bait. A test he had passed by seeking what others feared. There was no victory, only the understanding that the world he had known was an illusion, a construct designed to keep him blind, and perhaps sane. Lucien considered destroying the diary, burning the documents, severing his link to forbidden knowledge, but he could not. He had seen too much, learned too much. To destroy it would be to deny reality itself. Instead, he hid the diary, buried the most sensitive pages, and prepared for the next encounter. The first confrontation came at dawn. A knock startled him. When he opened the door, no one was there. Only a small device, cold and metallic, on the floor. It activated instantly, projecting a holographic figure. Tall, hooded, faceless, the same presence from the hidden archive. Lucien Moreau, the voice intoned, echoing with multiple tones. You have glimpsed the truth. You are now part of the system. You cannot leave. You cannot reveal what you know, but you may continue. There is a path forward, if you obey. Lucien's mind raced. Part of him wanted to throw the device, scream, run. Another part, deeper and irrational, felt the magnetic pull of understanding. Knowledge was alive, aware, influencing those near it. To resist was not an option. In the following weeks, Lucien became an agent of shadows. Not by choice, but compulsion. He moved among the archives, cataloging, studying, subtly altering documents, always under the gaze of forces he could not see. Occasionally, he glimpsed other operatives, figures like the hooded one moving silently, intentions unknowable. Yet despite terror and paranoia, he could not abandon hope. He believed that one day, someone would be ready to see the truth without being destroyed. Until then, he worked in silence, a solitary witness to the machinery of secrecy and control. He had become part of a system older than he could imagine, a guardian of knowledge too dangerous for ordinary minds. Even as he adapted, he could not shake the sense that the folder, the one that had drawn him in, was not finished with him. In the dead hours of the night, he felt its presence, pulsing like a heartbeat in the darkness, calling him forward. When he closed his eyes, he could see it hovering just out of reach, waiting, patient, eternal. Lucien knew the path ahead was uncertain, shadowed, perilous, but he also knew he could never turn back. He had glimpsed the truth, touched the forbidden, heard the whispers. And in that knowledge lay both his curse and his purpose. Lucien Moreau's life had become a careful balance between knowing too much and surviving it all. The folder, the missing secret documents from the UN archives, was no longer just an object. It was a presence, a force that bent reality and perception around him. Nights were the hardest. He lay awake, hearing whispers that were never quite there, seeing shadows flicker in the corners of his eyes, always feeling the faint hum of knowledge calling him forward. Months passed in this liminal existence. Lucien moved through the archives like a ghost, cataloging documents, subtly shifting information, and learning the contours of the silent projects. He understood that the UN archives were not merely a repository. They were a stage, a theater designed to conceal something incomprehensible. Every file, every passage, every shadow was part of an intricate system meant to protect humanity from truths it could not safely hold. But the deeper he delved, the more dangerous his position became. The Custodians, shadowy, faceless agents of secrecy, were no longer distant watchers. They left messages in his files, rearranged documents overnight, sometimes appearing at the edge of his vision, motionless, observing. Lucien realized the organization he had stumbled into was not static. It adapted, corrected, and punished with efficiency and patience beyond comprehension. Then the folder reappeared, not in the hidden room but on a public shelf, mocking him. Its presence was impossible yet undeniable. Lucien approached cautiously, aware that any sudden action could provoke an irreversible response. The whispers returned, louder, filling the empty halls. You were chosen. You cannot escape. Knowledge demands sacrifice. His fingers trembled as he touched the folder. Instantly, the world around him changed. Lights dimmed, walls warped, air thickened like fog. The whispers coalesced into coherent thoughts in his mind. Memories not his own. Images of events he had never witnessed. People he did not recognize, all rushing through his consciousness. Lucien fell to his knees, overwhelmed, and saw visions of the past. UN officials made secret decisions. Documents were destroyed or hidden. Operatives vanished. He witnessed experiments twisting perception, altering reality for entire populations. Through it all, a recurring presence, the hooded figure, patient and eternal, guiding events, ensuring some truths remained buried while others revealed only to those ready, or doomed, to bear them. When he regained focus, the folder had vanished again, leaving a faint glow in the air. Something had changed. Its essence lingered in his mind, like a pulse. The knowledge was no longer just information, it was alive. It had become part of him. Days passed in a surreal blur. Lucien noticed subtle changes. He could sense tampered documents, feel operatives' presence before seeing them, glimpse snippets of events before they occurred. But with this gift came a price. Anxiety, a gnawing fear that he was losing grip on the distinction between reality and the conjured knowledge. Then came a direct message. A small black envelope slid under his office door. Inside, a single card bore a line in silver ink. "Tonight, the choice will be yours." Lucien understood immediately. The Custodians had summoned him for a final trial, a confrontation that would determine whether he would continue as witness, pawn, or something else entirely. The weight of inevitability pressed down on him. Night fell, and a storm battered Geneva's streets. Lucien moved through the empty corridors of the UN building, hidden passages familiar yet alien. Shadows twisted unnaturally, temperature fluctuated, whispers followed him relentlessly, guiding and warning. At the passage's end, the folder rested on the pedestal, untouched and radiant. Beside it stood the hooded figure, impossibly still. Lucien's heart pounded. He felt the pull of the folder's knowledge and the undeniable truth. There was no turning back. Lucien Moreau, the figure intoned, a resonant chorus of overlapping tones. "You have been tested. You have seen. You have learned. Now you must decide. Take the knowledge fully and accept what comes, or turn away and live in ignorance. But know that ignorance carries its own peril." The folder hovered, pages fluttering as if moved by an unseen wind. Lucien knew the choice was irreversible. He had glimpsed the machinery of global influence, hidden manipulations, experiments, and disappearances that shaped the modern world. Walking away meant abandoning everything he uncovered. Accepting the folder fully risked mind, humanity, perhaps even his soul. He hesitated. The whispers grew louder, coaxing and threatening. He felt the irresistible gravity of understanding and knew the moment of decision was upon him. The room shifted. Shadows moved, walls bent, revealing impossible geometry. The Custodians were not merely watching, they tested reality itself, seeing how he would respond under extreme pressure. Lucien took a deep breath and reached out. The moment his fingers touched the folder, a surge of energy coursed through him. Knowledge poured in, raw and unfiltered. He saw entire histories, hidden agendas, outcomes manipulated from behind curtains of secrecy. He felt countless minds, living and dead, merging with his. Time warped, stretching and contracting. Pain shot through him, sharp and merciless. But beneath the agony was clarity. Lucien saw the full scope of the silent projects, the Custodians' methods, and hidden truths they protected. Some knowledge was too potent for ordinary minds, capable of unraveling reality if misused. The folder was not merely a repository, it was a living interface with these truths, a bridge between human perception and the mechanisms controlling it. Hours, or perhaps days, passed. When the torrent subsided, he collapsed, utterly spent. The hooded figure remained, silent, patient, almost approving. "You have chosen wisely," it said. "The knowledge you hold is dangerous but necessary. Guard it. Use it with care. The world is not ready to see what you have seen. You are now a keeper, a witness, and a participant. Remember, the unseen always watches, the silent always acts." Then it was gone. Shadows returned to normal, walls straightened, temperature stabilized. The folder remained, inert, no longer glowing, but its essence lingered, a constant reminder of what he had learned, witnessed, and become. In the following weeks, Lucien resumed work in the archives, outwardly ordinary. Inside, he carried forbidden knowledge, understanding forces operating behind civilization's veneer. He could feel the custodians watching, guiding, correcting. But he was no longer a pawn. He was a participant in a game beyond comprehension, a guardian of truths the world could not safely handle. Occasionally, he glimpsed other operatives, shadows moving at the periphery, monitoring, judging. Perhaps they too had touched the folder, carried fragments of its knowledge. Lucien did not seek them out. Curiosity was both gift and curse, and some questions were too dangerous to ask aloud. Despite isolation, fear, and constant tension, he could not deny the thrill of understanding. He had glimpsed what few could imagine, seen what others feared to dream. In that knowledge was power, responsibility, and the unshakable sense that the world was far stranger than it appeared. One stormy night, a faint shimmer appeared in his office. The folder had manifested again, pages fluttering as though beckoning. Lucien approached, steady now, no longer trembling. The familiar aura of intelligence and intent surrounded it. He reached out not with fear but with understanding, knowing the cycle would continue, that knowledge always demanded a witness, always required a keeper. As his fingers brushed the cover, he felt the surge, the pulse, the call to comprehend, to bear witness, to participate. He smiled, not in relief, not in triumph, but in recognition of the truth he had embraced. Some secrets are eternal, some knowledge inescapable, and some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Lucien Moreau had entered the world of the silent projects unwillingly, yet survived, adapted, and become something more than human, straddling the line between observer and participant. The folder would call again, the custodians would always watch, and the truths he held would always demand vigilance. The world outside remained unaware, streets of Geneva alive with ordinary lives, rain falling on cobblestones, UN lights glowing innocently. They would never know the shadows in the archives, the whispers shaping reality, the knowledge Lucien carried in silence. Some truths are meant to vanish, some knowledge to be hidden, and some secrets are eternal. Lucien closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the folder within, the pull of understanding, and the presence of the unseen. In the quiet hum of the archives, surrounded by shadows and whispers, he understood at last that he was both guardian and witness of something beyond comprehension, a silent participant in a mystery that would never end. The missing secret documents had vanished from the UN archives, but their influence remained, alive and persistent, and Lucien Moreau, forever changed, was their keeper. The world continued unaware, the rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the shadows, the folder waited,